Kia ora tātou. Are you ready to go? Feel free to move to the front if you want to get a better view of this incredibly good-looking panel. Look, we do have a few questions we'll run through and kick things off, but please, if you have questions you want to ask of the panel as we go through, just use Slido as you have been doing during the day. I've just been told we don't have enough mics to go around this room and the next, so if you do have a question, you have to use Slido rather than putting your hand up and using a mic. I thought what I would like to do, though, just to kick things off, is get each member of the panel to give a quick introduction of who they are and who they work for, and their experience of China, perhaps, and a quick snapshot of current status in China with their business. So I might as well just start with you, Carl.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Carl Ye. I'm the founder and managing director of GMP Pharmaceutical. GMP Pharmaceutical is a key manufacturer for the complementary medicine and the dietary supplement in Australia and New Zealand. So GMP is setting up in 1994. So at the first few years, we don't have too much business with China. Because that time in China is not rich enough to buy the good stuff from Australia and New Zealand. So just after 2000, so we can see the China, the buying power really strong and actually increasing very sharply for the last few years. So GMP, we have office in Beijing and employ about 40, 50 staff. And also we have a bonded warehouse in Tianjin Port. So currently GMP about, I think about 30% of our product export to China. So that's
Wait. Sorry. Hi. My name is Louis Lee from C2Me, and C2Me is a New Zealand-made health and beauty brand, and we sell the New Zealand-made skincare and supplements. And many people question what is C2Me means. Actually, it's really interesting. And C2Me stands for Customer to Manufacturer Integration, because back to 2014. The Alibaba came to New Zealand and had a really big conference to tell the future business is not B2B, not B2C, but will be like C2B. So we especially 2014 the China e-commerce cross-border e-commerce policy started. So we thought this is a perfect chance for we start a new brand and based on the manufacturer background. So me and another two Kiwi business partner, we start this brand back to 2014. And until today, back 2017, C2Me become the top 10 best performance New Zealand brand in Tmall Global. And we start from zero, and today we own 150,000 of the members, online members in China. And the unique for C2Me is we every single dollars we sold in China will back to New Zealand first, and we pay the New Zealand TP the commissions, and also we control the database. We have all the individuals end user database, and we can do the analysis, we can do the management, we can do the marketing. And the dream for C2Me future is we want to customize the health and beauty products for each individuals. So which means each individuals will have their own formulation of the health and beauty products. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name's Kevin Parrish. I was, up until a couple of weeks ago, based up in China in Shanghai, running a company called Primary Collaboration New Zealand. It was an innovative business model that was established in 2015, and we had 6 primary shareholders that came from meat, dairy, wine, apples, and seafood backgrounds here in New Zealand. Prior to that, I had 3 years in Hong Kong with New Zealand Trade and Enterprise as the Trade Commissioner there. So I've had a little bit of time up in the marketplace. I wouldn't say I'm an expert. I'm a bit wary about people saying they're experts in China. I'm certainly an observer though, and over that period of time I've observed a lot. Primary Collaboration New Zealand now represents 14 brands in China, and it's a key account management of style. We have 23 people employed, including a very capable back office team. The business has expanded over the last 4 years. We originated from the Tohono Boot Camp, which was the inaugural one, was in 2012, when a group of New Zealand primary producer leaders got together at Stanford University to debate how they were going to sort of tackle the China market, which at the time was 4 years into the FTA being signed in 2008. And they got around the table at Stanford, and their biggest challenge was, how are we really going to succeed in China? And a few of them landed on the fact that rather than they do it individually, they should combine resources and pull themselves together. And I've heard a little bit about that today at from some of the other speakers around how we can collaborate more. And I'm a big advocate of this because I think it's absolutely essential. And it's probably irrespective of size. We had some pretty big partners with us. One of our shareholders was Silfern Farms, and they're about to sort of go on and do their own thing in China. So the PCNZ business was very much about de-risking the market entry to China and giving companies a bit of a leg up and a chance to sort of have a look at the market before jumping in completely. And I think Rob used a nice analogy today about green fees. When he came to visit PCNZ a couple of years ago with a group of farmers from Silfern Farms, his analogy was like flatting. He says, at the moment we're flatting here with PCNZ, but one day we'll be buying a house. And in fact, that time is coming in the next couple of months. He'll be buying that house up in China, which is a success factor for us and our business. What we did, I guess, is we worked on our key account manager type people. We're working around promotion, marketing. They did a bit of troubleshooting, I guess you could say, as well. They were actively involved in managing distribution, looking for new distribution, and overall trying to add value to what our shareholders and our clients were wanting to do in China. And we've got a couple more of our clients here, I think today. Rocket's over here with Austin and Tony. And we've been picking up new clients as we've gone through. Most recently, we signed up Douglas Pharmaceuticals in January. So we're starting to branch out from away from, I guess, the primary sector, although it's still our core, but into other areas where we can help support companies that are interested in tackling China. And as I said earlier on, I think it's imperative that we do this and think about this collectively. I've also recently been involved in the establishment of the New Zealand Business Roundtable in China. The New Zealand BRIC is what we call it. And that's a group of like-minded people up in China that are very interested in making sure that the voices of those people that are on the ground there are heard, and that we've got a bit of a position. Our job there is to play a little bit of an advocacy role, but certainly to look at how we can sort of get that information that's very important to how China operates back into the hands of the people that need it, the decision makers back here in New Zealand. So we've sort of expanded that out, and the New Zealand BRIC, Mark Tanner, is actually involved in that with me. It's good to see him here today. And I think that's another way that we can sort of work together on tackling a big market like China. Thank you.
Kia ora everyone, my name is Joanne Edwards. I'm the founder of Kiwi Garden. It's my pleasure to be here today, and I've certainly found a lot of the speakers very interesting. It's the first event I've attended, so I'll certainly be back next year. And I'm very impressed with all your quick return from the caffeine breaks. I hope that you get something out of the session anyway. For those of you not familiar with Kiwi Garden, we are a Hawke's Bay family-based business. We founded Kiwi Garden on the preface of providing natural, nutritious food for our children and babies, and we are in the baby category in China. We launched in 2015 into China. We're in 8 other international markets, but China's our largest one. We're currently in 800 supermarkets over there, 1,200 baby stores, and we sell across 25 online platforms.
Kia ora koutou. My name is Richard Wyeth. I'm the Chief Executive of Medaka. For those of you who don't know Medaka, we're a Maori-owned dairy company based in Mōkai, which is about 25 kilometres northwest of Taupō. We're established in 2011, and we sell to China a lot. When we first started off, we was just selling whole milk powder, and our intention was to just send 30% of our product to China. That was our strategic intent. Well, I can tell you that's gone as close to 80 or 90% in some years, and that's the reality of how China's grown. When I first started selling product to China back in the time when I worked for Open Country Dairy, New Zealand as a country was selling about 50,000 tonnes of whole milk powder up there. This year it'll be closer to 500,000 tonnes. So through the FDA, there's been a huge increase as China as a market for the New Zealand dairy sector, and that's been really important for Medaka as well as we've grown and started our business. So we started off with whole milk powder. We then launched a UHT business. So we send 250ml bricks of long life UHT, and good to see Terry here, our customer. So Terry and I did a deal in Shanghai, Pengjing many years ago, and we now send 240 million bricks up there every year. So to give you some idea, we could produce New Zealand's requirement in about 1.5 days out of the factory. So China as a market is significant for us. So about 70 million in revenue just in our UHT business. The third string to our strategy is developing our own consumer brand. So Tupel Pure was launched last year, and I'll talk about that a little bit later on, but that's sachet powders up into the China market, and that's around the kaupapa of Medaka was our shareholders wanting to build relationships right from the farms through to the consumer. And that's incredibly important to our shareholders, that they actually want to know where their milk ends up. So Tupel Pure is going to be the vehicle for delivering that. And I guess I'll talk a bit more about that as the session goes on. So that's us. Thanks, Mike.
Cool, thank you very much. And as you can see, quite an eclectic mix-up here on the stage in terms of entry into China, different sectors, different stages of entry, different product sectors. I'd like to just explore first a theme that sort of came out a little bit during the day around agility. And I think anyone with any experience in China knows things move very fast. And we talk about China perhaps growing now at 6.5%, but as was mentioned earlier, even that 6.5%, a lot slower than in the past, is still going to bring about another $1 trillion or so in GDP each year. And it was only in the last couple of decades that China was only at $1 trillion GDP, so it's still going to grow really quick, still going to continue to change really quick. And I think we see a lot Chinese businesses continue to move very quickly, change very quickly, adapt very quickly. And we've heard cases where, for example, a New Zealander or a New Zealand company produces something that's not quite right for the market, maybe the packaging's not quite right, but very quickly a Chinese company or a Chinese invested company will perhaps replicate that and improve on it and grab that market share the New Zealand business should have had. So I'm just wondering if we can go through the panel very quickly around that question. How do you deal with that competition? What do you do to get ahead of the competition and stay ahead with the competition? And Carl, I might start with you as probably one of the longer established players in China, and then we'll move through the panel.
Well, when talking the competition in China, I want to make 3 points. The number one is about we need to be patient and positive on the competition. I think, rather than scare the competition, I think it's a good time for New Zealand, because a few years ago, 10 years ago, even I don't think New Zealand have too much opportunity to compete with other countries like European or USA, because that time all the traditional channel, the older generation, the big European and American already, do their homework many years ago. So now it's good time, because New Zealand have this opportunity to have a reasonably, level field to compete with other countries, especially like Mark Towner mentioned, a lot of new generation, a lot of new channel, e-business. So that's creating a good opportunity for New Zealand, especially for the value-adding industry to compete. So we need to be positive, and we need to be patient on the competition. New Zealand, I don't think we have the culture, we don't scare competing with other, rugby, whatever. And the number two I want to make is the position. So just because China is huge, and New Zealand is a tiny, small country, and so we need to position ourselves. Don't at the beginning have a really big plan, want to do a big thing in China, because like we forecast GMP many years ago, we more focused on the baby products. Because same like Joe, the baby in China, just for baby, every year they had a new baby, about 20 million new baby. So that's already a big market. So then if you're a baby, you target a certain section or certain province. So I think that's, the position is a very important one. We do find some company too ambitious at the beginning, and finally, the resource haven't got enough resource to cover everything. So I think the position is a very important one. The third one, I think we need to be innovation. That's a very important one. That's from our experience. So because the market is changing, the consumer changing, the new generation, they always want something different from their parents, right? They're looking for new thing. So that's what it's a good opportunity for New Zealand. So if we, as a new, value-adding country, so if we have innovation, that's GMP, basically we benefit a lot. So we creating a lot of products which currently is very popular, like hot products in the Daigou or in the internet business. Also, we have handle like a black box. So we're developing a black box for the safety quite a few years ago. So this proved very important for the Chinese regulator, because China, the regulator, even consumers, they want better traceability, right? If you have a good technology and working technology to trace all the products back, and that's the consumer will definitely give you a good point to win the competition. So that's 3 points: passion, and position, and innovation. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe I'll turn to you next, Richard, in terms of Miraka, a slightly more recent approach into China.
Yeah, I've got a few general comments too, Mike, if that's right. I think innovation's really interesting, and we talked about packaging, but I think what I've seen over the 10 or so years I've been going up there, they've gone from, I guess, being the best copycats, and that could be packaging and something like that, but you have to be really innovative to adapt so quickly, and they've proven to be world class at that, but they've actually moved away from copycats, and this is some of the feedback I got on the recent trade mission with Minister Parker, is they've gone from being experts at copycats to actually being the innovators, and I think that is a real challenge for Kiwi companies, and what we're trying to do certainly is work with as many Chinese nationals as we can to help bridge the gap, because you can't do it from New Zealand. And I guess that's my take-out message, is you can't sit in New Zealand and expect to keep up, because it just won't happen.
Thank you. And Joanne, what have you found in terms of staying ahead of competition?
Yeah, well, it's a consistent theme, really. I mean, it is the most competitive and complicated market in the world, and you have to bring your top game into that market. And certainly for us, the focus has been on innovation and the ability to adapt quickly. And that's across all aspects. It's not only your product offering and packaging, but it's also about how you're connecting with your customer and how you're collecting that feedback into your NPD chain. So it's across all of that whole process, really, that it's really important.
So a strong innovation process.
Yeah.
And maybe, Louis, you could add a little bit to that, because after all, it's in your name, going from consumers to manufacturing. How do you deal with the competition?
Actually, I have, I joined the delegation a few days ago, and we had a conclusion that actually really impacted me, and we think the Chinese people like Kobe, refine, and also innovate. So I think instead of the Kobe, I would like to use a new word. It's called learning. So learning, refine, innovate. So I think Kiwi, we also can do this part, because C2Me actually started 4 years ago, and when I was started that project with my business partners, and many people question, you sure you can customize the health and beauty products for each individuals? How you are going to control the costs? And we all know the manufacturing line will be, they need to get the economic points to produce as much as possible for one batch. But our target is we want produce one piece of the products for each batch. So how comes that will become truth? And people always question me. But I question them. I said, 20 years ago, when Jack Ma saying Alibaba will be the great company in the world, and people thought he was joking. So, and 10 years ago, when people saying Like if you use your mobile phone, you can do everything. You don't need, go bank. You don't need to pay your bill, go to the post shops. And people still not believe it. But I would say probably 10 years later, not even 10 years later, probably 5 years later, we can do customized for each individual clients. So I think that is the C2Me, the business model. And I said, if we think about C2Me as a brand only, that will be limited, like value. But if we think the C2Me as a business model, that will benefit to all of the manufacturers in New Zealand. So C2Me, what we did last 4 years, actually we collect the big data. And thanks for Alibaba, they supply actually the big data to open resource. So today we have the Taobao app. If we scan one picture, we will find exactly the same products selling on Taobao, and we can searching by their quantity and also the reviews. So this open resource is free. So based on the open resources, we can do the analysis. Like for C2Me, we do like that. So we do the research and we found out what products actually should C2Me to make, and what exactly the price range we need to focus on. Probably some of the products is really good to sell, but it's not suitable for New Zealand made products because of the value is low or not premium enough. So so last 4 years is this business model really indicate the C2Me brand to go ahead. That's why we became the top 10 best performance New Zealand brand in Tmall Global. Yes, this is just like the little story for C2Me in last 4 years. But in next 4 years, I think C2Me as a business model will benefit to more of the New Zealand business. That is my wish to build up this brand. We want eventually to benefit to the whole New Zealand industry. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Kevin, have you got anything to add from your experience of what was 6 and now 14 companies in PCNZ?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I think general sort of observations from that side would be in the light of, you mentioned the word agility, I think, and it's something that you need to certainly take into account when you're going into China and setting up in China. And I think it's about that, designing that agility into your business model in China, because you need to be able to move quickly. And I know there's going to be restraints and limitations, and I guess through my experience up there and working with the 14 different brands, we're obviously trying to work with them to develop the market, grow the market, but at the same time, you've got to be moving relatively quickly. So it's a challenge for New Zealand companies to work out how do they effectively do that. And a lot of that will come down to trust, building a lot of trust with whoever it is that you might engage up there to get the job done. Because it's those people on the ground, as Richard sort of alluded to, that you need to actually help drive the business forward. So I think companies and people need to think about that from that perspective, about agility and how to make your business adapt and move quick enough to actually meet the opportunity. Because the thing in China now, and it's prevalent now because of the domestic brands coming through, is that the opportunities are opening up and companies are trying to move into them, and those companies are now the domestic ones as well. So you've got the domestic, plus you've got all the other international brands trying to move into that opportunity, into that gap, and unless you can sort of get a hold of it quickly, it'll be gone before you know it. Things are, the shared bike systems sort of almost, 3 years ago it emerged, and now it's pretty much a monopoly with Mobike being the only one left operating, I think, these days. But it's a boom-bust sort of thing, and you've got to be very quick onto those things. So sort of my take out there is just that look at how you design that agility aspect into a business model in China.
Thank you. Now we're starting to get a few questions, but just remember, if you feed them through, we've got a couple more questions we'll go through, and then we'll go to the questions coming in from the floor. So that's slido.com and CBS19, I think is the code. Can we just talk and change tack slightly and talk mistakes? Really be keen if you can be yourselves here or pull the skeletons out of the closet, and maybe just share what's been your biggest mistake, each of you, in terms of China. I think if we can learn from others' mistakes, hopefully we won't replicate them. So if we can just ask each of you, biggest mistake in China, what you've done and how you've rectified that. Louis, would you like to kick off?
Actually I have another role as beachhead advisor for NZTE, and what I did talk to Mac before is I think my role is not only sharing the happiness but also the pain. So during the last 4 years, I think I made like significant mistakes, but also a really good experience is, we focus too much on volumes, not value. So this is what we mentioned from this morning until now, and New Zealand need focus on premium, not the volume. C2Me actually, when we first get into the e-commerce business back to 2014, that was not that tough as today. And we sell the supplements, for example, the grape seed, the capsules. We sold 2014. We sell around $14 on Tmall, and 2015 or 2016, so we can only sell like $20. So this year, this category, these products only can sell like, the retail price only back to $18. So which is like, there's no margin for if you always focus on the volumes. And I found that there's a big issue for this strategy. Risk is in New Zealand is nothing cheap, and it's all expensive. The labor cost, and also the material, and even we trying to driving down the price. We compete with Swiss, we compete with GNC, and we found even we sell in cost price, still we can't win the price war. I really, think I was really confused back to 2018, and I review myself. Me and my business partner really seriously think about what is our position. So we start, repositioning ourselves as how we are going to focus on C2Me brand as a premium New Zealand-made products, and then we start reformulate the products going to premium. So the label design also changed, and from the Chinese like it, the design back to New Zealand identity, the design of the label, and also the formula is from the middle-low formulations to back to middle-high, and the price gone up to 50% up. But really impressive, our sales is doubled. So I think really important for New Zealand brand is we don't have chance if we're going to the volume and ignore of the value. So this is the pain I had last 4 years. But lucky we found the right way, and we start rebuild up the brand. And I think 2019, C2Me will have another double growth. So which is really, we all really getting more ambitious to for this year sales. Yeah.
Thanks, Louis. Joanne, what about you? Mistakes?
How long have we got?
Just to focus on your biggie.
Yeah, I think, the thing about China is you have to constantly adapt, and that's just the nature of the beast. So I wouldn't see any mistakes as such. However, I would take a lot of learnings, and that is around your ability to pivot as a business. I think if I did have the benefit of hindsight, it would inevitably be around our rollout offline in the market. And probably, we had underestimated the resource required to grow a brand. Our brand that was our key strategy. To develop the brand and to support it offline does require a tremendous amount of resource. And we quickly found that out as we organically grew with demand and grew out geographically. It was very easy initially, but then it was continuingly to provide that brand support and on-the-ground support to our sub-distributors that was really challenging for a small business. So I think that the key learning, I guess, would be to really keep it tight when you're launching in China, use the metrics to identify your key market, your key channel, and make that consolidate there and understand the resource required before launching further afield.
Thank you. And over to you, Richard.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, one of the biggest mistakes we probably made, which we all do, is make assumptions on things. So we assumed when we did the 250mm bricks that they're long life, so they have a shelf life of 9 to 12 months. So we didn't think that was going to be an issue in terms of urgency getting that product to market. What we didn't understand from the Chinese consumer is, you'll remember looking in the fridge, picking up the milk bottle, looking at the date on the milk bottle for fresh milk. Well, they do that with long life milk. We assumed it wouldn't be an issue. So we had to quickly hustle and make sure we could get our product checked 10 days in a container on a boat, not a slow boat to China. It had to be a fast boat to China. So that's how we rectified it. But it just came back to a simple assumption of, hey, it's a long life product, so dates will be fine. Supermarkets said it has to have X amount of shelf life left. You know, there was a number of things that we learnt in that process. We were able to overcome most of them. But in New Zealand, for those of you who are not dairy farmers, we get at peak month about 1.5 million litres of milk in a day to our factory. Through the winter, about 200,000 litres. So there's big peaks and troughs. We thought we'd be able to make it in the peak, put it in a warehouse and send it in the winter. That just hasn't happened. So that was one assumption. The other assumption, just quickly, was we thought a 250mm brick that was good for China would be easy to send to Thailand and Vietnam and all these other Southeast Asian markets. So we went in there and they said, no, we just want a 200mm. Can you do that? We said, no, we can't. And that was the end of that. So we had a whole marketing strategy based around, and to be quite blunt, offsetting risk in China, putting it into other markets in Southeast Asia, which we couldn't actually deliver on. So that was a really good learning as well. We've got a Vietnamese shareholder. We had a slimline brick. They wanted a Prisma, which is just a different packaging format. So again, you've really got to do the research before you jump in. That's very difficult when you're trying to hustle. So when you're trying to accelerate and do things quickly to get into China, it is a hard thing to balance. So yeah, we've learnt from our mistakes, but we've made a few as well. That was probably the biggest one.
Cool, thank you. That word hustle, as you might have seen if you watched the Pete Crisp blog that we played earlier before, it came from Jade Gray, and Richard was also on Minister Parker's mission. So that seems to be one of the big takeouts, and I'm assuming it's going to be one of the big takeouts of this conference. We got to hustle, we've got to move fast. So Kevin, any other mistakes you want to share with us?
I think on a general sort of basis, I think from what I've seen, it's all about identifying the right partners in China. So you've got to take the time out to do that in a very organised way, I guess, or constructed way, to identify who's able to actually do what you want them to do. And it's about getting to the consumer, I guess. So the thing I've sort of seen in China is that it appears often that everybody can do everything. And what I've sort of termed it up as is you need to work out what their sphere of influence is. What can they actually do? And sort of getting through that takes a fair bit of work, but you've got to identify that right partner as soon as possible. We've seen some instances where it hasn't quite worked out for us and it becomes painful, very painful. So everybody might want to jump in with the first partner that comes along, and possibly that's the way to go if they're the right one. But you've got to sort of step back and sort of separate yourself slightly from that and go through a bit of due process around that, I would recommend. The other thing I would do is, the mistake's one of the ones we made, and it was a mistake in the sense that as we set up our business, we outsourced a lot of our service providers initially because we were just very small to start with. There was a couple of us basically kicked it off. We outsourced our business and we outsourced some of the compliance side, particularly the tax aspect of it. And if there's one thing I've learnt since being up there, you've got to get that right. There's absolutely no way you can end up in a bit of trouble with the tax side particularly. And, you know, we had a provider and it didn't work out. They made a few errors on one of the month-end tax returns, and we found out, and it was obviously it gave us a black mark. There was very little liability on them, but it gave us a black market in the sense of where we sat. So there was some pretty harsh discussions, and basically we fired them, and we onboarded all of that. So we took it in-house basically because we thought that we needed to have complete control over that aspect, which was our long-term plan. but it just meant we sort of accelerated once we came up against that, and that for us was a key thing. And you know, having it in-house gives you a lot more control, and obviously you can sort of make sure that we're doing things absolutely correct. Because as I say, in China, you cannot be mucking that up. So that was a key learning.
Thank you. I guess I can just add a little bit on the resources side of things in terms of making mistakes. Several years ago, I was involved in a company and we were moving into China, and we ticked a lot of boxes. We did a lot of consumer research. We understood the consumer. We had a really good partner. We had good locations for retail. So it was all looking very promising. The one thing, though, that we probably missed out on in getting right was the resources back home. And so when we went to get into the market, one of the things we'd committed to was, and this was a clothing company, to develop a winter range. We hadn't done it, so lack of resources meant that we weren't ready for it, and so we ended up trying to sell a winter jacket that's suitable for an Auckland winter in Beijing. So Beijing, you know, people here from Beijing or live in Beijing, gets down minus 20 or more in winter. Our jackets are for a winter where it probably gets to about 0. So our company wasn't ready for it, and the resource thing that's coming out here today, I think, is really, really important that people understand the amount of resource required to move into China and deal with that fast-changing market. Can I just flip that question round now, perhaps, and look at success? So in the same way as you've given us examples of mistakes, are you able to give us a couple or a good example of success, what you've done really well in terms of an activity or a strategy in China? Richard.
Yeah, I'll jump into that, Mike. Yeah, Topol Pure, we had a launch for Topol Pure at New Zealand Central, and it was during CIIE week, and what I loved about that was Alex Shan, who's our GM of China sales, he organised it with zero involvement from me. We just left into it. So I sort of, he'd given me a brief of what he was going to do, but I'm pretty trusting. I'll give everyone an opportunity to make a mistake. But it was absolutely outstanding because it was China-centric. So we had key opinion leaders there. We had a Murray Kapahaka group, which was awesome. But it was really designed around the key opinion leaders. And we'd had a Kiwi launch the night before, which you can imagine how the Kiwi launch was done. Lamb chops, red wine, speeches, everyone standing around having a drink. Our launch that Alex had arranged was people sitting down at tables. They all had their phones. We did have some speeches where we had the kapahaka. It was about different types of styles of food. There was very little alcohol there, but it was a really interactive process, and it meant that the key opinion leaders were taking snapshots. It was quite bemusing, I guess, for me when you stand up and giving a bit of a brief on Medaka when everyone's sort of got their head down tapping on the phones. So you don't want to do it as a vanity project. It was a bit disconcerting, but the feedback we got from that one launch was outstanding, and the fact that people loved the product, and it was all over social media. We had Miss China there, we had some other important people that I obviously never heard of or never met, but yeah, as I say. So the key learnings were, you know, Chinese employee knew what was needed, let them run it as they see fit, and just give them the support they need. So that was a real success story. Topol Pure for us is ahead of target for the year, 18 months in. We're ahead of our sales target, so it's been really good. So that's it.
Thank you. Who else would like to share a success example?
Yeah, I'll go. So PCNZ, between 2016 and 17, we grew our business's revenue 16%. They were going to measure the 217, 218 in the next couple of weeks, I think. But mainly, if you break that down into sort of case studies around what we sort of were out to achieve, and it wasn't necessarily just about the money, in our Apple businesses, and we had 4 Apple businesses involved, one of them in particular, during that period of time, we managed to reverse out of effectively the trade channel, so going into the fruit market, we were sort of exposed 65-70% into that area, and reversed that into 65% into direct business with retail in China. And that could only really be achieved with people on the ground, with the connections into those retailers that were required. So that was, for us, was a big success. And then the fact that it obviously gave us better margin capture around that for the shareholder, but also gave us a step closer to the consumer, which is just as important. So being able to get a little bit closer to what they're after. We also took Silfern Farms business basically from a zero base with their value-added range, so they do a lot of commodity business, as you'll be aware, in China. We were only focusing on the value-added Angus and Reserve ranges, And what we were doing there was setting up specific distributors that were targeting the five-star hotels and restaurant chains. And the girls I employed around that were just helping or supporting those distributors to get into market there. So we were doing a lot of that sort of work. A little bit of the other stuff we did, some of the troubleshooting and a case study around that, and I think that's a success was that, we were able to mitigate some claims that were put against our shareholders. Because we had people on the ground, we could be responsive, we could get to the port pretty quickly with the importer, have a look and actually see what was going on. And in one particular instance, we got a $40,000 US claim down to about $8,000 US. So, those are sort of success factors for us and what, I guess, where we demonstrated value back to our shareholder and client base.
So can I just ask, without that collaboration, do you think those successes would have happened for those companies?
I think it'd be a lot different. Possibly some of them would have, yeah, Mike, yeah, absolutely, I think, to be honest. Some of them certainly wouldn't have, and I think that's the advantage. The added advantage of the collaboration is that the group of market managers we employed were all sharing information. So we became very efficient at finding out who was really good and who was really bad. And at our fortnightly team meetings, we would have those discussions. So it was beneficial to the broader base, not just to the individual. And I think if an individual company was up there, and I know there's many of them in this room that have individual businesses up there now, you don't sort of get that breadth of knowledge, I don't believe. And so that was hugely important to us. And of course, what I always said to my directors was the fact that don't think of it about having one person in the market, think of it about it as having 20 people in the market, because effectively that's what we had. So we had 20 market managers running around China, meeting with chefs and procurement people, category buyers from retailers all the time. And so they could actually be promoting the basket of products that we sort of had in PCNZ rather than just their individual ones. Obviously they were there for the individual ones, but it was more about broadening that out. And I think that's the advantage of having a collective group approach.
Thanks for that. And just talking about a basket, down the outside and down to in the corner there's Trade Monster, who are representing New Zealand Food Basket, which is another recently formed collaboration. So there's 18 companies joined that, and they're doing an online play with Alibaba at the moment, which will likely extend to other channels at some stage as well. But if you're looking at ways of getting in there with other companies, go and talk to the team down in the corner there. Other examples of success, Carl?
GMP Pharmaceutical normally is pretty low profile because we are the contract manufacturer. But in 2014, suddenly GMP Dairy, which one of our factory, become quite famous because on the media a lot. Because GMP Dairy, which is the infant formula factory, becomes the first one and the only one in New Zealand passed the China, registration after the very tough auditing. So if I put this one as some kind of success, why we achieve this one? Because before we setting the GMP Dairy in 2009, so we did ask the China team, do a little bit of research, try to understanding what's likely the China regulation framework will be for infant formula industry. So after the melamine issue, so they done a lot of research, visit a lot of government official, getting some expert opinions. So finally read a report. They say, looks like China will put the infant formula as some kind of medicine. So so that's from this kind of report. So we saw the GM. It's when we setting the new factory. So rather than using New Zealand traditionally using as a food factory, so that's why we're setting, as a pharmaceutical standard. So GMP Dairy is the first, infant formula factory in New Zealand using a pharmaceutical standard. Not only the facility and the building, also documentation, all the management system. So that's we did benefit. So when the China, government official come to auditing together with MPI. So they validate the pharmaceutical system, and so they're quite surprised. Looks like maybe we are maybe one of the very few in the world, already started using a pharmaceutical system to run the infant formula plant. So that's give a good result. So that's just because we done the research. That's what after that one. So one of the key function of the China office is to do research and getting some report regularly. So that's so that's maybe part of the story.
So it sounds like part of that success for for many of the people on the panel is coming from having people on the ground, and in your case to get the information, but resources on the ground seems critical. Lou?
For C2Me business side success, we actually 2014 we successfully transferred from 20,000 initial investment to today value over $10 million. So this is a business success. We're proud of that. And for my personal success, I had a joke with Bruce. I said 18 years ago when I was studying in Tauranga, I was picking up the kiwi fruits in the orchard in Te Puke when I was studying the college as a school holiday. And back to, after 18 years with the Minister David Parker's the mission delegation, I had a chance to sit beside of Bruce. So what a prod. So yeah, and I think that is to myself, that means a loss for that delegations. For C2Me, actually, we from the whole day we discussed about the data management and how data important to the business, to New Zealand business, and also the value added products. C2Me, as I mentioned before, we have the Timor flagship store, and we own the whole chain. And we collect the data, and we indicate the manufacturer, our factory, to make the products, and we sell back to Chinese consumers through the Timor flagship store. So every single dollars back to New Zealand first. So I think that's a success for this business model. And another one is we know where we sold to. So for each individuals, we have the database. We know their name, we know even their national ID, we know what they bought in last few months. So I think the data management is become more and more valuable in future. So this is my next steps for C2Me to upgrade. So we actually want to build up a strong data management team. So probably I got another chance to work for Bruce. So yeah. So yeah, I think this is the success for C2Me during the last 4 years. Thank you.
So it's a big play on data, but I suppose, Bruce, that's something you could use in a bit of advertising to get some more pickers. One day you're picking kiwi fruit, and a few years later you're leading Taobao, one of the top 10 Taobao global store sellers. I reckon you'd be surprised. Joanne?
Thanks. Yeah, we're about building our brand and market, and when we launched, part of our marketing strategy was to focus offline, and I'll get to that in a bit more detail with the next question, but it was essential that we got cut through on shelf. So we undertook a lot of market research into our area, a lot of competitor analysis around the offering, and across our key regions that we were targeting. And the offering that we came up with was quite unique, both in terms of its design and also its packaging format. So we did achieve cut through quite quickly, and of course that created production issues at home because we hadn't expected that uptake to be as quick, but that's another story. But I think the ultimate indicator of success in China is when your competitors emulate you, and that was emulated within a year. We'd changed the whole face of that category. So that's something we're really proud of, and it also put us in a position that we are an innovative company, and we have to continually innovate. It was a good start for us.
Thank you. I might just address a couple of the questions that have come up from the audience. If I can just take the second one here. Do cultural differences still play a major role when launching a product in China, or is it more similar to Western markets? Well, I think, Richard, you partially answered that through your discussion on launching a product. Does anyone else just want to add to that, to answer that question?
Yeah, I'll jump in. Yeah, I think absolutely. You've got to differentiate the product, and it's in China. It's not as easy these days as just taking a product out of the shelf of Countdown and putting it up there. They like to see the fact that it's for sale in Countdown, there's no doubt. And they're one of the most, I think some as Mark alluded to earlier, they're one of the most researching sort of type consumers around the world. They'll want to sort of see that, but I think there's a good case study I've seen about the Tim Tam story up there that's been put out there, and I think that's a good example of sort of customizing the product, but maintaining your brand values basically, and what you're looking for. But the taste profiles, everything's a little bit different, I feel, up there, as my sort of, again, my observations, and you've got to be sort of careful about just sort of assuming that whatever you do down here and produce down here will be adopted, accepted up there instantaneously.
Yeah, I'll jump in there as well. I think, Mark, you talked about it earlier around the cultural differences between regions as well, and that's a significant consideration that New Zealand businesses often don't delve into deep enough. And it's very interesting when you look at, the strategies in each region and what takes off and what doesn't. So that's another important factor.
Absolutely. Do you want to add anything, Carl?
It's not black and white to answer. It's really hard. So from our experience, definitely we need to keep the difference to distinguish from the China or other country products. But in the meantime, they in their way, they want to have some Chinese culture as well to be combined. So, for example, like the packing, like the vitamin packing in New Zealand is basically just plastic bottle, very simple. And in China, some people love this one, but some people, because in China, they buy as a gift. So it's not just themselves as a consumer. So that's why they want to have a bit of luxury, have some gold, have some label. So this is really depend on which market, which position, you position your products with. So I think if you target on some people only for the gift or presents, it's better try to raising a bit image from the traditional New Zealand simple packing to a bit more luxury. So that's really case by case, very hard to say.
I guess I can just add from NZT's perspective, seeing quite a few companies dealing in China, to answer that question, absolutely the cultural factor is critical. And it's not just China culture, it's looking across the different geographies, looking across China and making sure you get it right for each of those markets. I think Mark already talked about different height of people, different temperatures across the country. So getting that right for each of those regions is just critical. The other question we have there, do any of your businesses use, I think that should be incorporate Māori culture to sell or promote your products into China? And does it provide an interesting point of difference in market? Richard, as a Māori company, I might get you to start with that one.
I was wondering whether you'd throw to me. Look, it's a really good question, and of course we do. We did quite a bit of market research on this, so consumer research around, obviously, Miraka's Māori-owned business. What does that mean? And it scored about probably 5 or 6 in terms of priorities, though. So, and it's the same with any product. You've got to have a number of key attributes and a number of different layers to your story. So it's obviously an important part of our story, but it's not everything. And it does create a point of difference, and we'll always use it. But I think it's probably more valuable in the relationship side of things than the product. So when we're building relationships, whether it's with distributors or key opinion leaders, that's when it really adds value. There's no question that when we stand up and do a haka or a waiata after we do a presentation, it makes a difference, and it really helps to strengthen business relationships quickly. From a consumer perspective, though, it's part of the story, but it's not the thing that will drive them to buy our product. That's the research, and that's what we've seen so far.
So underlying values resonate, but not necessarily just tacking Māori onto a product in some way, shape or form.
Well, that's our perspective. I mean, of course, we want to be authentic about how we do it anyway, given we are a Māori-owned company, and that's really important for us. It's obviously frustrating to see some that have just tacked it on the side of a can, but hey, that happens too.
Thank you. Anyone else want to comment on that?
Yeah, I'll jump in. At PCNZ, one of the sort of initiatives that we pulled together was going out collectively to the market and doing a range of promotions. We focused initially on hotel promotions, so these were going to hotel partners that we were supplying. We'd pull in other brands to be a part of it. And we blueprinted that up and gave it sort of a Kai concept. So that was our sort of branding that we wrapped around it at the time. And often, whenever we'd go and meet the general manager of these hotels and to have a discussion about it, there were two things they wanted. One was media coverage, and the other was some sort of cultural sort of event or performance. And it was quite unique. And so I think it gave us a point of difference. And the Kai concept that we came up to, we did 5 of them, I think, last year across China, mostly in second, third tier cities. Certainly resonated with the people, both the management team of the hotels, but also the consumers that we were engaging with during those promotions.
Thank you. We'll just move on to the next question, which also happens to be for Richard from Austin at Rocket Apples. 80% of your revenue is coming from China. Did you proactively try to reduce that, even if it might have cost you some margin?
Thanks, Austin. Good question. So I can go back to the story of where we got up to that amount of market share. It was around 2014 from memory, where China were paying about $5,000 or over $5,000 a tonne for whole milk powder. So that was in the commodity side of the business, and it's a very competitive landscape. The next best was probably $500 below that, so it was a pretty simple decision if you're selling 1,000 tonne of whole milk powder, if it's going to go to China or another market. So the answer is, in that particular year, we chose China because it was a market that was paying more. In subsequent years, we have brought that back down, but we're certainly well above the 30% that we initially targeted for China. It's an interesting strategic question about what percentage do you put in China. Rob Hewitt obviously said they'd double down. That may be easier given their shareholding, but they've doubled down in China. For me, China is a very strong market, and I can't see it going anywhere in a hurry, so I'm certainly embracing it. But it's a good strategic question. I've got a strategic discussion with our board in a month's time, so that'll be on the list. I'll tell you the answer then, next year, perhaps, Fran, if you invite me back.
Thank you. I'll just move on. We've got a few more questions here, but I've got a couple here that we'll ask the panel first. I just wanted to talk a little bit around New Zealand Story recently released some research on Chinese consumer perceptions. And among the results, there were 2 areas that really stood out for me. One is very much a growing sense of nationalism and pride in China, and that was alluded to a little bit earlier today. And secondly, there's a perception that New Zealand, if I put it really simply, we're seen as a bunch of farmers. So we're seen as very good at farming and producing, but when it comes to processing and actually innovation, we're not rated that high when you look at the research. So I just wonder if you can share what you've seen in the trade or from consumers on those 2 points around both how we're perceived and really that growing sense of nationalism and pride in Chinese nationalism. Kevin, do you want to kick off?
Yeah, sure. On the nationalism and pride thing, I think definitely it's changed considerably over the last few years from what I sort of have seen. I used to run a little bit up in Shanghai, and I'd go down the Bund usually quite early in the morning, and 6 a.m. down there, there'd be a bunch of tourists taking photos of the other side of the beautiful cityscape, and it wasn't foreigners, it was all locals, and they were down there, marveling at this fantastic city that's been built probably in just the last 25 years. And so that sort of started me thinking about that sort of nationalist and pride sort of sense of things. And the other thing I've been to watch, I don't know if many people will know this, some will, the Wolf Warrior series of movies in China. And that again sort of has a sort of a nationalistic sort of feel about it. It's the G.I. Joe version. And I think it's all positive for China, I think, and so they should be very proud of what they've achieved. It's a massive transition in a very short period of time, and it's not slowing down. I think it's continuing. So I think we're certainly seeing that.
What about the perception of New Zealand?
Yeah, I think New Zealand's perception, we're held in high regard, I believe. However, my personal belief is that we can't rest on those laurels of the clean green aspect. There's a lot of other countries that do that, and they do it pretty well as well. I think we've got to be thinking a little bit more outside of it. And I think I know you alluded to the research late last year, but there was also research done about 6 or 7 years ago where it pointed to the fact that they did see us as an agrarian type lifestyle producers and stuff. we're not very good marketers. And, there's a couple of examples coming through now where we are starting to sort of crank that up a bit. Zespri's certainly one where, they've taken the branding, marketing game to China and seem to be doing particularly well. A2 Milk is another great story, Fonterra with their Anchor brand. So there are some good case studies there, but in general, you scratch that first sort of layer and then there's not a lot underneath probably. Silverfin Farms coming up slowly, but need to sort of work on that retail product that they need in there. So I think that, we're getting there, but we can't rest on our laurels, and we've got to have other, to Richard's point, other attributes that underpin why people or consumers in China want to purchase our products.
Thank you. Joanne?
Yeah, certainly over the last few years there's been an enormous surge in nationalism, and I think that's gone hand in hand. It's become apparent that as their manufacturing has become more and more sophisticated and they're able to generate more premium products that are competing head to head with a lot of the international brands, it has become more apparent that certainly the preferences, if you've got two products with the same USP, then they will select one that is a locally produced one. So I think that is becoming increasingly challenging for international markets, to international brands to get into that space.
Cool. Louis, do you have anything to add?
Actually, I have been in New Zealand for 18 years, so I'm also, I'm Chinese Kiwi, so I'm also really proud of the achievement today. China, is really amazing change, and I actually, had to share, like insights with my with the delegation team a few days ago, and I said, today China's achievement actually is not happened today. It's happened prepared over the last 2 decades. So back to 20 years ago, I think the Chinese started to learning and trying to went to the developed countries to learn something new and bring back to China. And today, all the learned has been actually refined and innovated, and it's finally impacted to people's life. So that's actually the part of I think the strongest part for today China, and for New Zealand, and I think we really need to catch up the trend, and I think instead of nervous, I think we should become more excited. And I think China and the United States, I just read the news this morning, it seems like situation getting worse. I think there's a chance for our New Zealand business, and we actually can cover what the shortage from United States imports, and I think I think the New Zealand for next 5 or 10 years, as long as we keep the really stable relationships with China, we will have really good business.
Thank you. Richard?
It was an interesting question about nationalism, because I've asked the same question actually a couple of weeks ago in China, because when I went to the China International Import Expo, and if you get the opportunity, I'd go to that. I thought it was a one-off event. And then they said, no, next year's going to be bigger and better. So President Xi said, we're going to encourage international imports. So at the same time, he's saying we want to promote nationalism. So I asked the question, well, what's going to win out? And the response I got from many over in China was, look, they can both be successful. So nationalism will get stronger, but they will still continue to focus on imported products as well. And I think that was the takeout for me, is don't panic, and I think we'll be okay. In terms of the innovation, the research is the research. I'd probably agree with it. It looks pretty fair to me in terms of where New Zealand sit. I get told all the time we're not fast enough, and I can't disagree. But so I think there's room for us to improve in that space as well.
And agility comes up again. It leads in a little bit to one of the questions that have come up from the audience here. Given the geopolitical focus today, to what extent do you feel the sheer weight of consumer demand for your products will overcome the regulatory or political speed bumps? And I think Louis slightly touched on that, but does anyone want to comment on that question as well?
Yeah, I would say to that there's been a lot of great products out of New Zealand and they're well priced and they haven't been successful in the market. It's a very complicated market, and the more you get to know it, the more you realise the complexities at play there. So, I think that you have to ensure there is a clutch accelerator gear stick movement going at once, and certainly regulatory issues need to be addressed.
Sure.
Yeah, I think it's a very important aspect. I think for dealing with China, there's no doubt you're dealing with a market that there's certain levels of uncertainty in whatever you're trading as or doing. And I think that's another sort of observation from my side, is that often New Zealand companies, and excluding some of the larger ones, don't spend enough time in this space, because you can spend as much money in the world activating, promoting, getting your product moving off the shelf, but if you can't get it into the country, all that investment's lost. So New Zealand companies need to contemplate that when they're going into market. How do you manage that regulatory environment? And that does mean having relationships at different levels, at your port level or whatever, but hugely important to have those prior to the actual D-Day when it might happen, because you'll need to make sure that you can move relatively quickly on those. And that, I think, is something that New Zealand companies need to certainly address and look at if they're serious about China and entering the market.
Thank you. I might just turn to the next question. Trading with China is influenced by the choices of entry mode. How do you explore the advantages and disadvantages offered by different entry points? So I think we've already talked a little bit around some of the research, but perhaps if we can just ask the panel to dive into that question a bit more. How do you explore the advantages and disadvantages of the different entry modes into China? Louis, do you want to start there? Carl? It's obviously a hot potato question.
Yeah, I think that's part of your initial research and understanding your key channels and understanding the pros and cons associated with each of them. That should be the first step, really, before you even launch into it, because invariably the choices that you make in terms of what channels you're rolling out will affect your strategy going forward. So.
Yeah, Mike, I could touch on that a little bit. It depends how deep your pockets are too. So one thing I've consistently been told by some of our big friends over there is don't bother, because you just haven't got the horsepower. So therefore you have to be a little bit disruptive in the way you go to market, because we haven't got $30 to $40 million to invest in brand marketing. So online, Daigou, those sort of channels offer you an opportunity to get cut through. And then potentially when you'll get scale, hopefully you'll get some pull through. So that's probably how our strategy has been, is to go online first and then go a bit deeper again into bricks and mortar, offline as well. But we might target a Farrow Fresh equivalent as opposed to a Countdown New World. So that's the difference, and I guess so that's been our tactic. But everyone will have their own that suits them.
Do you think sometimes New Zealand companies were all a bit guilty of trying to do too much and too many channels and too many areas in China?
Yeah, I think so. I think for New Zealand brands, before they get into China, they really need review themselves and to think about what they can do for Chinese. For myself, I really get like give and get theory. Is before you want to get something from some people, you need to think about what you can give to them. So if you're not really clear with what you can give, offer to the benefits to other peoples, I think it's really hard for you to get something. And for New Zealand brands, if they want to jump into the Chinese market, like C2Me is a case, like why we only spend $20,000 to get into China, because of back to 2014, that's the first year of the China start the cross-border e-commerce policy. And not many businesses start doing that, and especially the manufacturers. And I thought that that was a perfect chance for manufacturers to get into the China. And actually it was really funny, because we start online business first, and for each individual products, we only had 12 pieces of the stock. which is impossible today. But because we are manufacturer background, so we have lots of formulations, and we make for, like our other brands. So we have chance to print 12 pieces of label and put on a stock and display online. So so we started $20,000, and after like a year, the growth is really amazing. And now each batch, we can stock in like 2,000 or 5,000, 4,000 units. So I think New Zealand brand, before get into China, need to find the right channels in right time. Today, if I start a new C2Me, I think the cost will be $2 million, probably because the timing is already gone. So, and for some of the New Zealand small business, probably it's not a really good chance for them to get into China yet before they get strong enough, because their supply chain is not that strong enough. Even they jump online, but they will get offline, quickly, because they can't supply enough stocks and they can't supply the competitive, price. So I think, find the right time and find the right products and find the right business model is really key for New Zealand brand to get into China. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
I think, obviously you've got to size the market first up and see what the opportunity looks like, but then go and start at the consumer level to work out the channels, if you go back to the channel side, and how do you sort of get to that consumer. So you need to know and identify that person, that individual, and work out what their behaviours are and where they're purchasing products so that you can go back through the line.
And probably to take it a step further, it's looking forward to what that consumer wants tomorrow as well, right? Because what we have seen quite often is people skate towards where the puck is, and by the time you get there, the puck's moved. And so it's always constantly trying to figure out where the trends are going rather than just where they are today. I think we had another question there around, is it hard to SMEs subject to bribery demand from healthcare professionals and Chinese authorities as big multinationals are? Not sure that's actually the case, is it, Carl?
I don't think so now. So a few years ago, yes, maybe. And now if you have chance to dealing with a Chinese government official, you can see they're really, really cautious, right? So even you might have a golf course, they will reject. So I think now, the Xi Jinping, that's one thing which I think is a really great job is anti-corruption. So I think now it's just back to the business, the quality, the price, and definitely relationship still play a role. So you need to have a good personal relationship with some government official. That's help, but it's not by bribery or other thing. So maybe some in some place, but I think compared a few years ago, that's not the issue now.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Does anyone else want to add to that? Big change since obviously Xi Jinping's come to power, right? Big crackdown on this sort of thing. Probably got time for one last question, and there's one here on products. Where to go? Question on vegan products, and I suppose if I can just expand that a bit more. As the world looks at alternatives to meat and traditional protein, what are the opportunities for New Zealand, I guess, in terms of traditional products, dairy products, etc. But going forward, what do we like to see where we can take advantage of as vegan products, meat substitutes and others come forward? How are we going to take advantage of that trend when we've got this country where we're so good at grass-fed produce? And Richard, I'm going to have to start with you on that one too.
Yeah, I'd get asked this question a lot actually. Should I retire? Because the dairy industry's over. Look, I think whether it's meat or dairy substitutes, my answer is if we've got to feed 10 billion people by 2050, there's probably an opportunity for all of us to have some meat or milk or some alternate proteins. So I think from a New Zealand, and I was going to say Inc. perspective, but I'll get in trouble, but from a New Zealand perspective, I think we need to look at where we can deliver our grass-fed products at a premium value proposition, and hopefully if we do a good job of telling stories, I think generally in New Zealand agriculture we haven't been great marketers, at all. So I think there's a good opportunity to do a better job of that. I'm not talking about Zespri. I think they're probably the standout, Bruce, so don't get grumpy. But I think there's a great opportunity. Silver Fern have started it in the meat, but they've got a fair way to go. And from a dairy perspective, I think we've still got work to do as well. And I think if we can do that and create a premium product, then we can still survive in a world where there's petri dish meat and milk.
Good to hear. Kevin, you've probably seen a little bit of this as well from your PNZ experience.
Yeah, I guess it's. I've been lucky enough to head up to Hono a couple of times, and it's been high on the radar up there at Stanford around the alternative proteins, and we've had presentations from the Impossible Burger guys and co. And I think that there's, that's obviously an opportunity for a lot of those companies, and whether there's an opportunity there for New Zealand, potentially because of the GMO thing, I always thought, with the plant-based thing. But what it will do, and I was actually in Dunedin the other day, talking to Simon, and I think it'll make it a premium for those dairy and meat products that we've got anyway. So I think, as Richard says, still sell the sizzle of what we've got and the natural aspect of that, because there's always going to be consumers that are going to opt for those. But there will be others that want alternative plant protein products, and that's not a bad thing.
So still lots of opportunities, but getting back to a point that was made earlier, just trying to sell purely on pure and green isn't enough. And as Richard said, if you do get a chance to go to the CIE, go and have a look at that and see the number of companies who you would look at a photo and think you're looking at a photo of New Zealand, because they're all promoting themselves as this pure and green. Some with authenticity and some not. I think we have to leave it there. We're out of time. I think, and I've seen the other team come back in, so we'll leave it there and look forward. We'll do a wrap up. Thank you. Thank you very much to the panel.